So here's the rub. Who even came up with that saying? Last year I was all upset that I couldn't go to my office's Halloween party because of the recession and I didn't have a job at the time. But it turns out my office didn't even have a party that year, so... But I did manage to go to my friend's pumpkin party, and it was there that I discovered some very crucial flaws. Number 1, despite the periscope that I put into the mask, I couldn't see very well. I was going to give an in-depth explanation about why that is, but just see for yourself here. Yeah. And number 2, the order of operations of putting on the costume is very annoying. First, I had to put this on my head, buckle it up, grope around for the belt that attached to the back to counterbalance the weight of the mask, clip it around my waist, grope around some more for my flamingo shirt, find a way to put it on without being able to see it, because remember, this periscope has a very limited range of vision. And then once I put that on, then I can put in the tablet into this little slot up here. Because if I do all of this with the tablet in the headpiece already, it would be very bad, just trust me. So this year, I wanted to try improving this costume. I already made a brand new lab coat that looks more like the game. And now I want to make a mask that is way better in that I can actually see out of it, and I don't have to go through all the trouble of actually putting it on. Also, I want to make sure the mask doesn't have these ugly seams in the front, but anyway, let's go. It all started with this picture of a pair of LED party glasses. The moment I saw it, I knew it was the solution to all of my problems. You could see out of the glasses between some slits in the plastic, and the slits themselves were hidden behind a thin sheet of darkened plastic that made it look like the entire thing was a screen. Ooh, magic. And I thought, if I could find a way to DIY this thing big enough for my entire face, then I could have a much improved Momo costume. There was only one problem. I didn't know anything about LEDs. I looked at a few tutorials and, yeah, let's just say I wouldn't be able to do this without also burning my room down. But I utilized my brain cells for a few seconds more and decided that in lieu of soldering a ton of tiny LEDs together one by one, I could achieve a similar effect using an LED strip. Of course, that means the DPI of the face would decrease by a lot, but it was better than me burning my fingerprints off and ending up with a product that I can barely see through. The LED strip I ended up getting was this individually addressable RGB strip at 100 diodes per meter, and I got 2 spools of them with the intention of making a 14 by 14 LED matrix. Smells very strongly of plastic. To control the LEDs, I acquired this Arduino through the power of Facebook. But I would suggest being smarter than me and making sure you bought a real Arduino instead of a cheap knockoff. But that's okay, I figured it out, it's compatible, I just had to download an extra USB driver thing. And given that this was my first time doing any kind of LED programming, I didn't really care that much. If anything, if I accidentally destroy it, I will have only spent $10 on it. The last thing I needed was some chopin cables, otherwise known as jumper cables, which I got for free from a very nice neighbor. Thank you, neighbor! And so, I watched a ton of tutorials and got to work. So now that I have all the coding and timing figured out, the next thing I'll have to do is to cut these LED strips up into lengths of 14 LEDs each and then solder them together onto this CD rack. And that's the scariest part because I don't know how to solder.
Hello, I'm recording.
For the record, I'm not soldering it directly onto the CD rack. I am taping it onto the CD rack and then soldering them together. This plastic is not being soldered, I promise.
Mika.
And now I am left with this little nub. This is the final result. I ended up doing only 10 lines for now, just because the aspect ratio looks more correct than if I did 14, which would be way too long. And this here is me realizing that it's... This ended up being a very annoying process, so let's just do this real quick. The LEDs had to be soldered in a serpentine fashion, making sure that the data, 5V and ground wires are connected to the corresponding pins in the next strip. My dad has a soldering iron, but we had no wires, but I decided to rummage around my sister's abandoned electronics kit and I found some copper wires. And then because I've literally never soldered anything before, I enlisted some help from my brother. And even then, we slaved over the LEDs for hours and could not get that dang solder to stick. So eventually I caved and we just ordered some solderless connectors that you could just clip the LED strips and wires into. And that was so easy, so I don't know why I didn't just do that to begin with. But then we ran out of clips, so I had to continue the project with only 2/3 of the mask connected. Okay, moving on To achieve the rainbowness, I printed Momo's rainbow onto this transparent decal thing I found in a thrift store. For extra sturdiness, I applied it to this clear cake box. I did make sure to check if I could see through both of them, because remember, our goal is visibility. And yes, all of this means that I should have just gotten a plain white LED strip instead of an RGB, but well, it was only $20, whatever. I'm whispering right now because it is the middle of the night, but look at that. It's working and it looks so cool. I don't have the bottom row connected yet, that's why it's dark, but look, you can see the eyes, you can see the mouth. Ah, I'm so glad it's working. Also, before I forget to mention it, I did add an overall brightness filter to all the LEDs. I just set it to like 5. I don't know what that means, but it just lowers it. Because every time I've been editing this, uploading it to the Arduino, and looking at the LED lights to see if they're working, it's been blinding my eyeballs. Even when it's done, I think I'll keep it this low because I don't want it to like blow out the cameras or anything. And I do want the rainbowness to show. I feel like if the lights are too bright, then it won't show. Hey Mika! The lights have been off for probably 10 minutes at this point, and I still feel like they're burning into my retinas. Real quick, let me show you the Google Excel sheet I set up to plan out the expressions, because the LED matrix program I wanted to use did not end up working. At this point, I found the CD rack I was using, which I literally just ripped out of my old desk, very cumbersome to use, so I commissioned my sister in imaginary money to laser cut this clear acrylic template for me. Then I ripped the LEDs off the CD rack and reapplied them to the acrylic. And then I was done with the LED portion of the mask and moved on to remaking the headpiece. I did plan to use the same white foam board as last time, but for the life of me, I could not get the edges to cut cleanly, so I just used a cheaper styrofoam board I already had. I did a quick test with the LED face and then a nighttime photography test. Yeah, you can see how much the full brightness is blowing out the camera. I used a nail to puncture the little audio holes at the bottom of the mask, and then I used craft foam to make the curved jaw edges because there was shrimply no way I could cut such a neat curve in the styrofoam. I traced out where the earpieces would go with my new candelabra. By the way, have you seen my new candelabra? It makes me so happy. It's part of my ongoing attempt to maximize my room. Anyway, that's besides the point. I made the base of the ears out of the old yogurt lids, and then in a stroke of recycling genius, I opted to use the LED spools as the ears themselves. Okay, so for the cracks and seams, I decided to use some quick seal. I also tried using quick seal to cover the exposed styrofoam, but it's actually very annoying to do, so I just used cardboard instead. By the way, when I was using the quick seal, I decided to read the instructions after I used it, and it says to not breathe it in or get it on your skin. By that point, I already had my nose like 2 inches away from the material, and also it was all over my hands. Oops. At least my family is home, so if anything happens to me, someone can rescue me. But anyway, the base construction was done, and I just had to spray paint it. Before spray painting it white, I'm using this Plasti Dip just to give it a nice rubber smooth coating. Why purple? Well, because it's the only one that was on sale. Here's how it looked after the rubber spray. Unfortunately, I neglected a very important part of the process, which is called testing the spray on the styrofoam first. Basically, the solvent from the spray seeped under the paper and caused the styrofoam to melt, I'm assuming, and that left some very unfortunate bumps and bulges. But I covered the exposed styrofoam with more cardboard strips and soldered on. After 2 coats of spray paint, this was the final result. Unfortunately, there's some kind of weird bubbling, and the paint really can't seem to get into these little cracks. So I did end up having to mix up some acrylic paint so I can hand paint my mask, which is what I was trying to avoid doing with the spray paints, but I think if I sprayed any more things on this headpiece, it's actually going to disintegrate. Here is the helmet all painted. I'm still not very happy with how warped the surface is, but not unhappy enough that I'm going to redo it. But otherwise, it's looking pretty cool, pretty great. I'm pretty happy with the paint job actually, because what I did was I made the paint a lot smoother by adding clear acrylic gel into it. Now that does make the paint a little less opaque, but it applies so beautifully. You can't even really see the brush strokes, and it's got like a beautiful glossy sheen. So next, I need to glue on this little button right here, attach these ear thingies right here, and then I'll attach this rainbow film on the inside. This already looks so cool. And then the LEDs will lay right in here, and then I'll find a way to attach it inside. The goal is to have it be removable just in case I need to do any like maintenance on it, or in case I want to like update it eventually. We'll find out. All of this is to say, I just used packing tape to tape it in. But then, disaster struck. I mixed up the ground wire and voltage wire and fried not only the first two LEDs but also this teeny tiny B2 diode on the Arduino, which after a lot of googling I found out is called a Schottky diode, allegedly. My little Arduino could not be powered to a full capacity anymore, nor could any new code be uploaded into it, and after hours of Reddit threads and YouTube videos and fruitless attempts to fix it, I had to face the dreaded truth. It was time to get professional help. I have just returned from the electronics store where I was attempting to buy a new Schottky diode for my broken Arduino, but it didn't have any that was in the right size in stock, so they had to special order it if I really wanted it, and they had to order 5 instead of just 1, so I didn't want to do that because I don't need 5 diodes, I just need 1. So I finally snapped. I decided to buy a real Arduino. This is the Arduino Every, and I'm really freaking hoping that it works. Also, I just want to say thank you to Reddit, thank you to this specific YouTuber, and thank you to everyone at Lee's Electronic Components for helping me figure out what the heck was wrong with my Arduino. Look at it, nicely nestled in this little foam bed. Look at my beautiful child. Following the advice from the electronics store, I fed the 5-volt power directly into the LED's pre-connected wires instead of feeding it through the Arduino, which would specifically prevent accidents like this from ever happening again. Speaking of the power supply, I'm using this mobile charger, and since it doesn't actually belong to me, I elected to velcro it into the headpiece. As the finishing touch on the headpiece, I added some wire mesh to the ears to simulate the headphone audio thingies and just glued them in place. I also really quickly whipped up a robot bodysuit. There's no tutorial for this, I basically just made it up as I went, and I used this out-of-place yellow fabric in the back because it was the only stretchy fabric I had. Lastly, I found this orange cat doll in the thrift store. I wasn't originally going to get a new cat since I still have Yam from last year, but it was only $2 and just look at her! Her name is Amber. I fitted her with the harness I made for Yam and she was having none of it. Here you can see me doing a camera test, and as you may be able to tell, the face is still way too bright. You can't really see the details of it that well. So I'm gonna go tweak the coding a bit and then... Wait, it's grand reveal time already? Oh my god, I gotta go dress up the set. Okay, so it's wrap-up time. Overall, I am super duper happy with how this turned out. From afar, you can't really tell that the DPI is super low, so that part I'm like really glad worked. The only downside is I couldn't make certain expressions. The first expression Momo has, which is the sad expression, I couldn't make that with these constraints. So I think in general, the best way to make a robot face is still to use a screen. The problem is just that having to make a screen that is see-through, that's gonna take a lot of experimenting. But I did set out to accomplish everything I wanted to with this project. It is very convenient. I mean, there still is the annoying factor of having to put on the mask and then the hat and then the gloves, but I think that's just normal of any cosplay. At least I didn't have to go through that whole debacle in the beginning of this video. As for visibility, I could see through this pretty dang well. I could see through the little slits and I could... Final, what was that? And I could see through the chin. There's like a little gap under here. I could see through that as well to the floor, which is very important because that's where all the tripping hazards are. And something I haven't mentioned before is that with the previous costume, I could not operate my phone when I was wearing it because I would have to hold my phone all the way up to my forehead, and even then it was very hard to get my finger to like press the right buttons. I also didn't mention this, but wearing the periscope for anything more than a few minutes made me very nauseous and dizzy, so I don't foresee myself being able to wear that at a party. But with this, you don't get this... Mika? But with this, you don't get dizzy at all. So overall, pretty great, pretty happy. Alright, let's go get a comparison. Here are the two versions of the mask side by side, and Mika in the background. So the aspect ratio of the face to the head is obviously a lot more correct in the new one. The old one, I was constrained by the size of the tablet I was using, which is not here because charging it up just for this video it's just too inconvenient. I didn't want to do that. And you see the audio holes down here? I used an X-Acto knife to cut this, which is why it's so big. I just used a nail for this, which turned out to be perfect. The button fell off of this, don't worry about it. Obviously, without a periscope, you don't have to have that missing chunk in the forehead. Not that you'd really notice it once I have the hat on, but with the original one, I could not cover this part because obviously I need to see. And these seams, these are the ones that I was most looking forward to getting rid of in the new version because I did not plan this through that well when I was doing the old version. With this one, I planned it through way better. There's still a bit of a seam where I did the protruding edge with the foam, but it's not nearly as noticeable as the old one. Not much to say about the side view. With the old one, I did sort of this like aged look. With the new one, I just went straight beige because that's the way it looks in the game. So this is actually more accurate. I don't think I mentioned this in my first video, but here I accidentally broke the yogurt lid. So I hot glued it together and then painted it over with this chrome silver paint just to pretend it's welding. I don't think anyone noticed, but I think that's pretty creative of me. So the new one, the back doesn't really have much to speak of. You can kind of see a bit of the movie charger poking through, but otherwise pretty normal, pretty standard, pretty plain. With the old one, the whole back is open so I could accommodate this very fashionable headwear, and then I tried to disguise that with some wires, which I mean at the time it worked pretty well, but comparing it to the new one, which is so sleek and clean, it just seems so rudimentary. And all the belts and buckles and stuff are still attached, of course. I don't know if you could tell in the video, but this helmet was sliding around a bit on my head while I was looking up and down. So in the future, if I were to wear this to a party, if we have a party this year, I would probably glue some foam to the inside of this just to keep it from tilting back and forth. By the way, I did not get rid of Yam. Yam is still here, and he will be friends with Amber. So yeah, generally, that will be the end of this video. Maybe eventually I will do another version. Not sure yet because the idea I have in mind is kind of really out of my wheelhouse. But then again, this LED was also really out of my wheelhouse and I still pulled it off, so we'll see about that. Okay, that is it. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.